Welcome to Making Maverick Moves. I'm your host, Gina L. Osborn, Army veteran and former FBI Assistant Special Agent in charge. What if the secret to your next opportunity wasn't what you know, but who you truly connect with? Today's guest, Renée Marino, is a Broadway and film actress turned communication coach and author of Becoming a Master Communicator, balancing new school technology with old school simplicity. You may know her as Mary Delgado in Clint Eastwood's Jersey Boys, or from Broadway in Pretty Woman and West Side Story. Now, Renée helps people all over the world build authentic connections in a time when we're more digitally linked yet emotionally connected than ever. She's proof that vulnerability, listening, and speaking from the heart create the kind of connections that open doors. Welcome to the show, Renée.
Thank you so much for having me, Gina.
I am so excited to have you on the show because what your message is so important about connecting with people. So I want everyone to kind of know your story and how you got to this place where speaking out and connecting with people is now your number one priority.
Yes. Well, my younger life, since I was a little girl, probably from the age of 3 or as young as I can remember, performing was my one true love. I loved singing, dancing, acting, and pursuing Broadway was always my biggest dream. And through years of perseverance, endless rejections, which a lot of people who are not in the entertainment field, not in the world of Broadway, don't really know how much rejection goes into it. I faced thousands upon thousands of no's. And in 2010, I reached my Broadway dream. I toured the country before that on several different tours. And in 2013, I was playing the role of Frankie Valli's wife, Mary Delgado, in the Broadway musical Jersey Boys. And for me, that was just one of the pinnacles of my career. You know, I'm really a Jersey girl, born and raised. I grew up just a mile from where the whole storyline of Frankie Valli and the Four Seasons takes place. So for me, it was so special. And I had toured the country with doing that role for a year. So to do it on the Great White Way was just super special. And one Sunday matinee, we were on stage singing My Boyfriend's Back. And I look out into the audience, and who's staring back at me but the legend himself, Clint Eastwood.
Wow.
Yeah. And we got word that he was going to be directing the film version of the musical. And truth be told, Gina, I didn't even think twice about it. I had never done TV or film. I always just did Broadway. And I said, oh, they're going to hire A-list celebrities out of Los Angeles to play these roles. Marissa Tomei is going to play my role. So didn't think much of it. And then they began calling people in from our cast to audition. And an audition is just like an interview. Well, at this point, I thought to myself, it would be amazing just to have the chance to audition. You know, when this movie comes out, I just want to know I gave it a try. Well, my agent puts in a call to the casting department, calls me back a few weeks later, and she says, Renee, I'm so sorry. I don't know what the problem is. They said they won't give you an audition for Mary Delgado, but they'll give you one for one of the smaller roles, one of the angels who sings My Boyfriend's Back. And Gina, I remember hanging up the phone, feeling so disappointed and just so frustrated because every girl I knew on Broadway was getting an audition for Mary Delgado but me, right? And I remember saying a prayer to God, and I was like, God, are you trying to tell me something? Like, am I not meant to be in this business? Because if I can't even get an audition for the role that I'm currently playing at the highest level I could be, then something's wrong. After a little while of feeling my feelings, which I always say is so important, right? Step one of powerful communication is having that communication with yourself. So I cried, I felt frustrated, and then I threw my hands up physically, literally, and spiritually. And I said, what am I going to do? I'm still going to go in and audition for one of the angels. The day of the audition, the casting director says, Renee, would you like to sing My Boyfriend's Back first or read the scene? And at that moment, I heard this quiet little voice within say, you have to do this. It feels too right. And I look at the casting director in the eyes and I said, you know, Jeff, I was really hoping to come in and read for the role of Mary Delgado. I had no idea what he was going to say. And he looks back at me and he goes, I was just thinking the same thing. I said, amazing, great. So I do the audition that day. I leave there feeling so grateful because I got the chance. That's
Mm-hmm.
what I did. I go back to 8 shows a week on Broadway. A week or two goes by, my agent calls me, and this time she says, "You're Mary Delgado in the movie Clint Eastwood." And I was like, "Woo!" Like, it was one of the most surreal moments of my life.
Wow.
And that first day, Gina, and every day that followed, I mean, really picture this. And for those of you who are listening, it was that feeling of like jumping off of a cliff, right? When you
Mm-hmm.
really talk about stepping outside your comfort zone, this is what I was doing. Yes, I was a performer, but let me tell you, Broadway theater versus TV film are two completely different mediums. So I was stepping way outside the comfort zone. But again, I had that little voice within, which is the truest part of ourselves, right? That gut intuition, those gut instincts. And I remember driving the first day to set and I was just like, okay, Renee, Clint Eastwood hired you, trust in your talent and leap. And that first day and every day that followed after we were finished shooting for the day, I would sit and eat lunch with Clint Eastwood, ask him every question I could, and then listen in a complete way. Because just like so many of you listening, I am like a sponge and I like to use every opportunity I can to learn and to grow. And about a month into the film, I'm eating lunch once again because eating's my favorite thing to do, Gina. I'm Italian. That's all I think about. And I'm sitting with Clint Eastwood and one of the producers of the film when they begin talking about how Clint knew he wanted me for the role when he saw me on Broadway. And I put my fork down and I said, do you guys want to hear a funny story? I never got an audition for Mary Delgado. The only reason I got to read the scenes is because I opened up my big mouth in the room and asked.
Mm-hmm.
And the two of them looked at each other. They said, wait, what do you mean? We requested you. We said, we want the girl from the Broadway show to come into this audition. Imagine my surprise. And
Right.
came to find out that day that there was a middle person, casting associate, juggling a few films at once and just dropped the ball on having me come in to audition. And in other words, if I did not have the ability to speak up and communicate my desire in the room that day, I could have missed my once in a lifetime opportunity. I could have been sitting in the movie theater watching Jersey Boys instead of on the screen in Jersey Boys, never knowing that Clint Eastwood was waiting for me to walk through that door.
And it's so important to have that connection. And we're going to talk about connection in a minute. But having that connection with either the voice in your head or that feeling in your gut, there's got to be something, and mine's in my gut. I trust my gut no matter what. And whenever I'm fretting about something, I'll sit there and I'll say, okay, well, how is this going to turn out? Is this going to turn out okay for me? And I ask my gut. And but if you don't have a trusting relationship with your gut or in the voice in your head, it's not going to help you at all. So, can you talk a little bit about the connection between that voice and yourself before we talk about the connections that you have with other people?
Yes. The communication and the connection you have with yourself sets the foundation, the framework for all of your external communication. Think about it. If we don't know ourselves, if we don't know what the heck we want, what our dreams are, what our fears are, what our struggles are, how could we ever connect with another person in a real way? It's impossible. And that's
Mm-hmm.
why I have a 7-step connect method. And the first step of that is communication with self, tuning into that voice, getting in conversation with yourself. When you wake up in the morning, instead of rolling right over to your nightstand to start work, checking your emails or hopping on social media for what I call the good old S&C, scroll and compare, right? Where we scroll and compare ourselves to others and then wonder why we feel so uneasy and we start our days in a panic.
Mm-hmm.
So instead, take that time, that precious time in the morning, even if it's 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and connect with yourself. I love using the practice of writing. You know, when we write, research shows we activate more parts of the brain. We we give ourselves a deeper understanding of who we are when we write pen to paper. So a simple practice that I love to offer is to wake up in the morning and simply ask yourself, how am I feeling? How am I feeling? And then take 5 to 10 minutes to put pen to paper to write the answer and not type it in the notes app on your phone. I'm talking old school connection, part of what I call that old school simplicity way of communicating. Put pen to paper. You'll see what starts to happen. And just like most things in life, it's a practice, right? If you're not used to hearing that quiet voice within, it's a practice. And the more you do it, the more you elevate that voice. And then we become like you, Gina, who listens to that voice all the time because you're used to connecting with it.
So why is it important? I mean, I know why it's important for us to connect, but I'd love for you to tell us why it's important to connect. And what are we missing because we're not connecting?
It's so interesting because we are in a world where we have more avenues and outlets to connect than ever before, yet we find ourselves so disconnected. And the reason why is because we have this influx of artificial intelligence, which is beautiful. It is such a gift. So I want to preface my next statement with the fact that technology is a gift. But if we don't learn to use it as a tool and not the tool, that's where we get into trouble, because the truth is, Gina, no matter how advanced artificial intelligence gets, the one thing AI can never replace is human connection. Human connection. And if we don't prioritize really understanding how to still have face-to-face conversations, how to look someone in the eye, this is where we start to see problems arise in our personal and our professional relationships. Because at the end of the day, all the human spirit wants is to feel seen, heard, and understood. Those old school manners of making eye contact, giving someone a smile, those never go out of style.
It's fascinating because you use that connection to get connected with Tony Robbins having a leadership role in one of his big shows. So having a connection is what gave you that opportunity.
Yes, absolutely. When I first started my business, I took a course from Tony Robbins and Dean Graziosi called KBB. It was called the Knowledge Broker Blueprint. And it really was about how to start your own business, how to turn your experience and your expertise into a business. And that happened to be, I decided to start this business because I had already started writing my book. And after Pretty Woman, the musical closed, I said, I'm ready to activate my other gifts. I want to be a speaker. I want to get my book published. And that's when I found their course. So once I took this course, I was a part of their community. And again, this was the start of COVID. And Tony and Dean began doing what they called these challenges, where they would go into the Facebook group, teach, and then the homework would be to go live on a Facebook Live video and speak about whatever the information was that they taught for the day. So the first one I did was Dean's challenge, and there was about 100,000 people in the group. And I remember getting on video the first day, going on a Facebook Live. And Gina, I think I was just out of the gym. Like, I was a hot mess. And I'm like, walking the camera. And after I posted that first video, I'll never forget getting a flood of messages from people in the group saying, wow, that was so great. Can you teach me how to do that? And I was so confused because I didn't know what they were talking about. I'm like, what did I do? Like, I was a hot mess, right? I'm sweating off of me. And then after a few days of this happening, I realized, oh, they want to know how I get on camera and be myself. Because most people don't know how to do this because it was the start of COVID. Virtual was a new thing. So that's when my light bulb first went off and I said, this is the first way I have to help people connect, through video. How do we make it still feel like an in-person conversation when it's through video, through Zoom? So at the end of that week, Dean's team reached out to me and said, Dean wants to interview you live in front of the group. So he interviews me live. He learned about my story about the film that I just shared with you. And then he said, I'd love for you to be on my podcast. So he is a top 1% podcast at the time. It's called the Dean Graziosi podcast. About a month later, Tony did a challenge, this time 300,000 people in the group. Same thing. I'd go live and I'd get all these messages of people saying, can you help me? Wow, how do you do that? And at the end of that week, his national speaker said, "We have one person who delivered so much value to the group, Renée Marino. You just won 5 days to Tony Robbins' private resort in Fiji." And I was like, "What?" And Gina, it was so surreal because here I was connecting essentially with Tony, with Dean, with their teams through video. Not met them in person. 6 months later, Dean's team reaches out to me and says, "Dean would like to know if you would like to co-host his and Tony's first ever World Summit." So here I go. I fly to West Palm and I co-host this event. And that's where I met Tony very briefly and obviously met Dean. And I met some incredible people, Jenna Kutcher and Pat Quinn and Russell Brunson. And that was kind of the first time I had an in-person connection. But I want to pause here and say what was so special about that is that, again, as I just shared, if we don't learn to use digital technology as a tool, we're going to be in trouble. And that's what I learned to do, to use it as a huge tool for connection, but not my only tool. So fast forward, that was 2020. Last year, Dean and I reconnected. He was doing a launch and he wanted to use me as one of his testimonials of someone who has gone through their program. So Dean interviewed me live on his launch. And then last November, about, a year, I spoke to him again and he said, "Are you interested in potentially hosting Tony's big virtual event at the start of the year, Time to Rise?" And I said, "Absolutely." And we started working every day. I would get the scripts and I would send videos back and forth to Tony and his team. And then this past January, I hosted that event. I got to share the offer besides just hosting and to work alongside Tony Robbins it is absolutely magical because one thing that I value above anything else is truly genuine people. And Tony is someone I followed for years. And let me tell you, he walks his walk. And I've had a couple moments, Gina, I'll tell you, because now we've been working together. I just hosted his beautiful wife Sage's event, She's Unstoppable, where Tony was right there with us. And I'm going out to host Unleash the Power Within in a few weeks. And I'll tell you this, when I was just there a few weeks ago for the She's Unstoppable Summit, I had a out-of-body experience where it's Tony and I, he's coaching me, we're working on the script, and it's just him and I, and we're going back and forth. And I had this moment where I feel like I floated up out of my body and I was like, "Oh my goodness, I'm getting to work side by side with someone that I've learned from and admired from afar for so many years." And thanks to the power of communicating through camera, of connecting on camera, that's what allowed this to activate. So yeah, it really is such an incredible journey it's been.
So how do you do that? How do you better connect with people?
When we learn four of the most powerful words the human spirit can hear and understand, you are not alone. And when we share our struggles and our vulnerabilities, we let others know that they're not alone in theirs. So powerful. And
Yeah.
another part of owning who you are means stepping away from what I call in the book keyboard confidence and stepping into all around confidence. I'm sure you've seen it. We've all seen it. That keyboard confidence, that raw, unfiltered confidence that only happens behind a screen and a keyboard. You'll look on Instagram or LinkedIn and you see someone you know on a personal level and you go, "Who wrote that post and what have they done with my friend?" Because I know they would never have the confidence to say that in person. That is keyboard confidence. And it's so dangerous because if we are not the same people in person, the same one that shows up online, the same one that shows up in our emails and our texts, that is where there's a break in authenticity,
Yeah, it's a break in trust.
in trust and integrity. And if people don't know who they're getting, they can't have that trust factor. So in
Right.
order to connect, we have to trust. We have to have
Yes,
a trust factor.
for
Yeah.
sure. And then
Yeah.
what about listening? Listening is so important. I don't think people listen these days.
That is step 6 of the 7-step connect method. And I call that complete listening, listening to hear and not just to respond. Everyone else says that communication is about what you say. I'm telling you, communication is about what you hear.
Hmm.
And we live in a world where you could turn on any news channel at any time of day on any network and see a lot of people talking over each other, talking at each other, but never talking with each other. That is because the minute we're in a conversation and the person who's speaking says something that we identify as a difference, boom, we cut off from listening. And that's why we see this great divide that we live in today. When I talk about complete listening, I mean grounding yourself. When you get in a conversation, ground yourself. Take deep belly breaths through a powerful practice called box breathing. Because what this does is calm your nervous system down. So, in this sense, you can focus and tune into what that person's saying. Then you want to become distraction proof. And what I mean is, don't just put your phone upside down when you're in a conversation, put it out of sight. There was a study done called the iPhone effect that looked at two people in a conversation with a cell phone present. And even though neither person looked at the phone, neither person picked up the phone, still that phone proved to be a distraction. And I don't know about you, but there is nothing more disrespectful than when you're in a conversation with someone and you're going to speak and you're talking and all of a sudden their phone lights up or they get a notification and they completely check out, pick up their phone, and then they go, yeah, what were you saying? Yes, definitely. It is a complete disconnect. When we are distracted in conversations, that can be taken as a sign of disrespect. So
Absolutely.
we want to listen in a complete way. Let's put those phones out of sight. Then conscious of your body language. How are you holding yourself as you're in a conversation instead of having your shoulders hunched over, arms folded, maybe, angling to the side? Instead, I like to share with my clients and when I'm speaking on stages, think 2 words, very simple, heart open. Open. As that person speaking, think heart open to them. Make eye contact, smile. Let
Hmm.
them know that you're invested in what they're saying. The next step is to catch the commonalities. While that person's speaking, instead of thinking about what you're going to say next, okay, so Gina's going to talk and then I'm going to say, which makes us completely miss out on what that person's saying. Tune in to catch things you have in common. This does 2 things. It keeps you present because you have to be present enough to catch those commonalities. And number 2, it gives you those connection points.
Yeah.
Then you can reflect back when it's your turn to talk. For example, wow, Gina, I didn't know that you were someone who was so invested in communication as well. That is what I teach on stage. Wow, boom.
Yeah.
Connections made, sentences go down, and now we can have a two-way conversation.
For sure. It's funny because my mom is 86. She's in great shape. She works out
Yeah.
3 times a week with a personal trainer, and she'll tell me the same story over and over. She likes to do that. But what's interesting is when I look in her eyes and she tells me the story for the 4th time, there is so much joy and life in her eyes. And that if, by being busy and not having time to hear the story for the 3rd time, but I've really had to stop myself because that's where the connection is. And that's something that I will always remember is that joy in her eyes when she's telling a story. So I think that really makes us think, what are we missing from other people when they're trying to tell us something?
Yes, and some of the best listeners that I've been around, I think of my one friend and mentor, his name's Stuart K. Robinson, and I interviewed him one time when I was out, launching my book. I did a Becoming a Master Communicator summit, and he's such an incredible listener because as you're speaking, you feel his energy just so connected. And when it's his time to respond, there's no rush. There's no cutting the other person off. He takes a moment and you see him process the information. And then when he goes to speak, it's from such an authentic place, because you know he has taken a moment or two to take in what you said, process it, and then reflect back what he wants to say. And it makes
Mm-hmm.
you feel good, right? Like, think about when you're in a conversation and someone's listening intently to you, you just feel good. You
Mm-hmm.
heard, you feel appreciated. And again, I
Yeah.
go back to what I said before. All we want is to feel seen, heard, and understood.
Absolutely. And as leaders, that's what we need to do with our people, is make them, like you said, feel seen and heard. One thing I learned from one of my old bosses, Steve Martinez, every time I would go into his office, and he had this giant office and he had a whole, like, couches and chairs over here. But every time I went into his office to talk to him, he would stand up from outside of his desk, sit down on the couch with me, and talk to me.
Ugh,
And that is where I learned true communication and leadership, because it's like you're moving a location. Having a desk between you and your employee, that doesn't cement your relationship. But
no,
going to another place where it's just you two and you're having that conversation without the distractions, that's where the leadership starts.
absolutely, percent. And it all starts from the top down. Speaking of leadership, when you are the one leading a company, a team, remember, you set the tone. Set the tone, and it all trickles down from there. So you want to be the best possible example that you can be.
Tell us again, where are we going to see you next?
Yes. Well, I'm heading out in about a week and a half to California, where Tony is going to be back in the States. He hasn't been back, I think, for like 6 years or so in the States for his Unleash the Power Within event happening October 9th to the 12th. And I'm so honored to be a host for that. And then I'm actually working, my dear friend and I, a fellow entrepreneur, we're doing our first women's event on Saturday, November 8th. And I'm really, really excited for that. It is, we're in the process of getting everything together, and we're starting promotion for that. And that is called Glam and Grit.
Nice. I
Yes.
love that. I love that. Thank you, Renee. And you are just a ball of light. When you and I met on David Meltzer's podcast, we just bonded. We connected
Yes.
just like that. So thank you so much for being on the show. You gave us some great insights, and we can't wait to see what you do next.
Thank you so much for having me. Have a great day.